Yeah, I think we will start again. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I have great pleasure in welcoming Professor Bharadwaj Mantha. He is from the University of Sharjah. Earlier, he was at the New York University at Abu Dhabi. He's a member of the workshops and summer schools committee, so he's going to present some applications, potential applications of machine learning. So I invite Professor Mantha to give his presentation.
Good morning. I hope you're able to hear me. Let me begin with sharing my screen. And I hope you're able to see my screen as well.
Yes, we can see. Yeah, we can hear you also. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning again. And before I begin, I'd like to actually take this opportunity and thank everyone, each and every one of you, for taking your time out and then attending my talk. And I'd like to also thank the IARC Students Chapter for organizing such a wonderful workshop, and special thanks to, of course, Professor Benny for putting together all the content and probably championing the effort. And of course, I'd like to thank him for giving me an opportunity to present at this great venue as well. As Professor Benny has suggested, I'll try to briefly introduce myself before I jump into the topic. But today I'll be talking about one of my works, which was part of my PhD work and part of my post PhD work, I would say, as well, which is generalized task allocation and route planning for multiple robots with multiple depots in indoor building environments. The title is a little long, but hopefully by the end of the presentation, you'll get a good appreciation of what I am talking about. If not, as always, please feel free to stop me at any time if you have any questions, if you're not sure. So you need not wait until the end of the presentation. So with that, I'll just like to quickly jump in, very briefly introduce myself, and then get ahead with the topic. That is me. My name is Bharadwaj Mantha. I usually go by Mantha. And I was born and raised in southern part of India. And I did my bachelor's in civil engineering at National Institute of Technology, Durgapur. From there, I moved to the construction industry, where I worked for about 2.5 years or so as a project engineer in one of the mixed-use developments. That's where I started to gain a little more appreciation in terms of how, for example, in general in construction, we're predominantly reliant on the human labor or resources or the wastage of resources. So lots of things struck my mind, and that's when I really thought maybe I should probably go ahead and get some knowledge and experience in terms of understanding as to how we can incorporate technology into this whole process. That's when I started to and decided to do my master's in construction engineering and management, where I started a little bit of my research chapter there, and slowly I got interested and I continued to pursue my PhD in civil engineering. From there, I moved on to New York University, Abu Dhabi, and where I did my postdoctoral studies. And then finally, I am at University of Sharjah as an assistant professor now. So with that, without further ado, I'd like to quickly get started with the topic. The topic of discussion as of now is building service robots. So just to give you a very generic perspective of what building service robots are, in simplistic terms, building service robots, all the robotic systems that assist people, let's say, at work and at home, can be termed as building service robots. So if we want to classify them, let's just say to understand a little bit better, we can classify them based on their functionality. Let's just say based on the professional services that they provide or based on the personal services that they provide. And one of the classic examples is the vacuum cleaner robot, Roomba, as you can see here in the bottom right. Hold on, let me just put on the pointer. Yeah, right there. So I'm sure most of you might have seen this, might have used this if you're abroad maybe. And one of the things experts predict is that intelligent robots will soon be ubiquitous. So we like it or not, we want it or not, we can see those robots kind of coming into our lives. And one of the questions we have is that for any of these robots to function properly, they need 4 key technical capabilities. One of them is, let's just say if you have multiple of these robots in a commercial space, the first thing they need to understand is what are they supposed to do? we can pinpoint that, let's just say, to the locations that they need to do the task. The task could be anything. The task could be mail delivery, the task could be delivering, let's just say, an equipment, or probably transporting something in a warehouse, or maybe even getting some things in a residential building, or in a hotel complex. It could be a butler robot where it's trying to, let's just say, transport the housekeeping material from one room to another. So the first question is task allocation. How do these robots intelligently, autonomously, how do these machines understand as to what they are supposed to do so that the whole process is optimized, the whole distance, the whole time? There are lots of things lots of factors that can be optimized. And the second thing is, once they decide, okay, let's just say there are 10 locations where the tasks need to be done. Now the next question is, for example, if robot 1 has to do 5 tasks, in what order is it supposed to do those tasks? So how should I do that task? Should I go from my location to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, or 1 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 2? It might seem like a simple problem. Once the number keeps increasing, the number of locations keep increasing, the problem becomes more and more complex. And then after these two, the next thing is the robot needs to understand at any given point of time where it is in the environment. Let's just say in the built environment. That essentially is localization. So the robot has to know where it is. Then comes, how am I going? So along the process, once the robot, let's just say robots start to navigate, once the robots start to know that they are at a current location, they need to go to location 1, then they need to go to location 3. So they need to understand along the process how they are going. So these are some of the key technical capabilities that they need to have to perform those building service applications. If we look at it, in today's talk, I'll be predominantly focusing, as you have seen in the title, or at least if you can remember some of the title words, we'll be predominantly focused on the task allocation and the planning aspect. We will not touch on localization and navigation. There's tremendous amount of work that has been done, let's just say, in task allocation and route planning, especially for outdoor environments. When I say outdoor environments like roads, cars, you're trying to do logistic kind of applications. But when it comes to indoor building environments, the work, at least, I'm not saying it's not there, but it's kind of limited compared to outdoor environments. And there are some fundamental differences. You can ask, okay, why not just apply whatever algorithms that have been developed for outdoor applications to indoor? Yes, it's possible. But there are some inherent characteristic differences. And that is one of the reasons why we cannot directly implement them. We need to adapt them. Yes, we can take them, but we need to understand what these differences are and then understand the pros and cons and apply accordingly. For the next four slides, I'll try to quickly talk about what those fundamental characteristic differences are. The first one is incomplete networks. When you consider an outdoor network, typically, you consider all these road networks and then they are more or less complete networks. But for indoors, due to all these physical constraints, the networks typically are incomplete. And the second is most of the indoor networks will not have a Hamiltonian path, which is one of the assumptions or constraints in some of the optimization algorithms that we develop. So what does that mean, Hamiltonian path? So a Hamiltonian path, a network is supposed, or a network is said to have a Hamiltonian path if you can start at one node and cover all the nodes without revisiting that node again. In simpler words, if I start at a particular location, I should be able to visit all the locations that I need to visit without coming back to the first location, or without revisiting any location again in between. Third, some of the algorithms like clustering algorithms, I think you might have talked a little bit about this as well in probably yesterday's talk as well, is network topology. So some of the algorithms do not consider the network topology itself when they are trying to classify, when they are trying to come up with groups that each of these robots should visit. And that plays a significant role, given that the networks formed based on indoor environments are incomplete. And then some of the algorithms like genetic algorithm or other algorithms have a random initialization. So initially they start with a random solution and then they try to optimize as they go along. And this could be one of the reasons why to reach the optimality, to reach the best solution, it takes probably longer than it is supposed to. And these are some of the key limitations that we kind of identified and observed, and then we try to learn from them. So even before I probably move ahead and talk about the proposed solution and the case study that we have done, I'd like to quickly stop and just to get things in perspective, talk about the problem statement that we have. Let's just say, for example, you have an indoor environment. You have n number of tasks that you need to perform. Let's pinpoint them to locations, as you can see. These are all the locations at which the robot needs to do the task. Let's just say we have m number of robots. You can do it the other way around as well, but I'm just trying to explain one phase or one style of a problem statement. Then the objective is that I want to minimize the total distance traveled by the robots. That way, indirectly, I'll be able to minimize the total time as well. For that, the mathematical formulation of the problem will look something like this. I'll not probably bore you with the details of mathematical formulation and equations, etc. But the idea essentially is that we want to allocate these tasks to these robots and then plan their paths within these tasks in such a way that the total time or the total distance traveled by the robots is minimized. Coming to the proposed solution, we tried to address this problem in two ways. One, we wanted to understand as to how the network can be formulated. As we initially said, we are coming up with that indoor network. Then we wanted to solve that network. So let's just say, for example, we have all these task requirements in a building. Now what we're doing is basically we are trying to create a graph out of it, a network out of it, which is incomplete. With the help of some tools like adding pseudo paths, etc., we complete that network. Once we complete that network, we will try to find what the single robot solution is, assuming that there's only one robot. What is that solution? Then we take inspiration from genetic algorithm and use crossover operators to divide them into multiple robots. After that, we form unique groups. So each group is pertaining to each robot. And then we find the solution within the robot with the help of some classic algorithms that exist out there. So again, this is just like a very rough picture of what the algorithm we developed is. And this is like the pseudocode for it. Again, as I said, I'll not probably bore you with mathematical formulations and probably pseudocodes, but I'll quickly jump onto the case study and maybe kind of talk about what were some of the observations we had. So what we did, we had the algorithm and then we said, okay, now let's just take a case study building. Let's take some of the existing algorithms, see as to how our algorithm is performing compared to theirs. Because that's the initial presumption we had. We said, yes, there are existing outdoor algorithms, but when you apply it to indoor, they might not work well because of so-and-so reasons. So we took a random floor plan. We identified all the locations that we need to do some tasks, let's just say, and then we formed an indoor network. As you can see, the indoor network is not complete because you will see not all nodes are connected to each other. In the representation itself, these are the node numbers, and these are basically the Euclidean distances between those nodes. So with that, I'll just quickly jump ahead. What we basically did was we tried to apply our algorithm, and then we tried to assume that there is only one robot, two robots, three robots, four robots, five robots. And then we tried to compare our algorithm's solution with the others, such as k-means and genetic algorithm, which are one of the most widely used algorithms in the field. So as you can see, we kind of developed two versions of our algorithm. I only kind of showed you what the second version of the algorithm is, which is the iterative, as you can see, and iterative MMTSP. So basically these two are the ones that are developed by us. And then as you can see, the next is basically k-means and GA. If you pay close attention, as you can see that as the number of robots increase, the k-means clustering algorithm, as we said, topology is one of the important aspects that needs to be considered. It's just not how close the nodes are, it's also how they're connected, especially when you're trying to solve an optimization algorithm for total distance. And that is clearly visible if you see when you try to see the numbers for k-means as the numbers go along. And then genetic algorithm as well. As we said, one of the limitations or one of the potential reasons why genetic algorithms sometimes might not give you the best solution is because, or it depends predominantly on the random tour that we initially choose. And that was one of the reasons why we also saw that genetic algorithm was good, but not always was it giving us the best solution with less number of iterations. Similarly, we tried to do it with some constraints. We said, okay, without any constraints, this is how the robots are performing. But in real life, that's not the case, because every robot has some distance constraint, meaning it has certain amount of battery. It can only travel certain amount of distance. I cannot say robot 1 travel 100, let's say, units, robot 2 travel only 2 units. So to kind of address that particular concern, to kind of address that particular real life scenario, what we did is we tried to impose some constraints, and then we started to see as to how the algorithm is performing, etc. And then we have seen this for multiple, again, the results I show you are only part of the results, just to give you quick snapshots of some of the findings that we had. We did the same and with 6, 1 to 7 kind of robots, but I'm just trying to show you only for 3, 4, and 5 number of robots. So we said, let's just say we have 3 robots. We have basically 1 depot. So all the 3 robots are located at one place. Or we have 2 depots, two robots are located at one place and 1 robot is located at the another, etc., etc. And then we wanted to see if there is a pattern. Is it better that all the robots are at one place, or is it better the robots are scattered? Is it better that or is there any particular pattern that it can give us when we have such a kind of problem? And as we have seen here in this particular case, not necessarily, as contrary to our belief, not necessarily spreading all the robots all the time is the best solution, because it will depend on, again, how the network configuration is. And that is one of the things that you can see even here. For example, if I spread out all the robots, the best way in which they can allocate or they can visit all the locations and come back is with a total distance of 83.5. But if I actually aggregate them in a 2:1 kind of a ratio, so 2 robots in one place, 1 robot at the another, then I can see that the result, sorry, in this particular case, I can see that the result is actually better than spreading all the kind of robots. So those are some of the observations that we kind of had. Again, I'm not probably showing you all the kind of scenarios that we ran, just 1 or 2 quick observations that we found. So with that, what I'd like to say basically is that we tried to propose a generalized task allocation and route planning algorithm for indoor building environments, so for indoor networks especially. And then we kind of tried to show that it kind of works better than some of the existing outdoor algorithms because of those potential reasons. And then we also found that informed initialization, as I said, instead of random initialization, in our case, the informed initialization is basically using a single robot solution rather than probably going ahead and choosing a random solution. So using such an informed solution, we found that the number of iterations that you take to get to the final solution is faster or is lesser. Then we also saw as to how, for example, k-means is not performing as well as the proposed algorithm, and we predominantly believe it is because of the network topology, the way in which k-means clustering considers only just the proximity of the nodes, the proximity of the nodes that it's clustering. And then we also saw as to how, for example, the multi-depot combinations outperform the single depot combinations in several cases. So not every time that all the robots starting at one place will have the best solution. You need to have multiple depots, basically robots spreading out. But it also doesn't necessarily mean that spreading them every time will give you the best solution. It depends on the network configuration. It depends on what are the tasks you're performing or how you are performing, etc. And the number of robots, the next point basically says the number of robots in total distance need not be inversely proportional. So what that basically means is, for example, if I consider 3 robots for performing all these tasks, I get a particular distance. If I take 4 robots, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm reducing the distance if each of these robots have to do some work. So that's an interesting observation as well that we found. And then, of course, as always, there are limitations to what we had proposed. And then we still need to understand as to how we can optimize that base depot locations. So basically, we have done it for 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. But in general, the question is, how can we tell these machines, how can we tell these robots, once they know what the floor plan is, how can they learn from the floor plan? Or if I keep adding task locations to that particular floor plan, how can these robots optimize their depots, optimize from where they need to start so that they can cover all the tasks in a minimum possible distance or in a minimum possible time? So we are still yet to work on that, because here we just considered like fixed kind of depots. We said, okay, we have 2, we have 1, we have 3, we have 1. So we are still yet to get there in terms of automating that kind of a process. So hopefully, we are currently working on it. Hopefully in a few months or so, we'll be able to kind of get there as well. So after this, we will get like an accomplished product in terms of saying, if, just to give you the bigger picture of what it is, if, for example, we have an indoor building environment, and then we have certain amount of tasks that need to be performed, then the machines can automatically recognize and understand as to where they need to start, how they need to go, how they need to perform, and get back to their base locations accordingly. I hope you'll be able to recollect, at least, or connect to some of the things that you have learned in terms of clustering and other supervised and unsupervised learning. You can at least connect those little bit of dots. Before I end, I'd like to acknowledge, of course, the support of all the co-authors of this work, starting from Borja, Carol, Vineet, and Min. These are some of the references that I used, and I'd like to thank you all for your time. I hope I didn't exceed. Sometimes I get excited when I'm trying to present. With that, I'd be more than happy to take any questions.
Is it possible to solve same problem using multi-agent reinforcement learning or other reinforcement learning techniques?
Yes, it is, but that's the thing we're still exploring. I haven't tried that yet, but yes, that's where we are headed. As I said, hopefully in the next few months we'll get there, and that is one of the things that we're definitely exploring. I'm sorry, I don't know who that was, but thank you for that first question.
Thank you.
Dr. Mantha,
Yes.
it's a great work that you have done. Number one, my question to you is, since we know that if we address the problem of indoor construction, so one is the base and second is the floors. So let's say if the floor is, let's say it's 70 floor building or 100 floor building, and you have not considered the time. Maybe that you have considered, but you have not shown us. So time will not be the factor in the data sets so that we can estimate it. Because if the base station is at 10 floor and the robot is working on the 70 floor, and when it needs charging, then it come back to the 10th floor and then it recharge by themselves. So what is your comment? Means time, with respect to time, we can measure the other variables which are required for the machine, for example, velocity or speed. So time is not the important factor. Timestamp is not the important factor with respect to the distance and the nodes, that is R1, R2, R3. Because getting back to the base station is itself a challenge, because it takes time. Once you finish the task, then you come back to the base station, then you recharge, and then you again address the problem.
Okay, I know what you're saying. So it's a good point. It's a very, very interesting and good point, actually, and it's very relevant. And that was one of the reasons why, for example, when you see, we consider the base locations. Again, I did not show you all the details, but the way in which the algorithm works is basically, it considers, there are, for example, let's just say you have a 70 floor building, as you said, and you will not have, let's say, charging stations in once every 10 floors, because these days, more or less, every floor, if you consider any construction, every floor will have some power socket or the other. So the idea, at least when we started this, was that at least in the given floor, you will have a couple of charging stations to begin with. And when we started the work as well, the main motivation was actually for indoor built environments, so already operational existing buildings. So this was predominantly for existing functional buildings. So the assumption we made, and in the algorithm that we consider, are all these locations that are randomly placed inside any floor space that potentially can serve as charging locations. So the idea was, not every time the robot needs to come back to its own depot to charge. For example, the robot is en route, it's on the way. And then there is a closest, nearest charging station, let's say. So the robot tries to take a slight detour, charges, and comes back. And this is the real-time understanding or real-time optimization of the total distance that I was referring to. So the whole idea was, it need not necessarily come back to its own charging station, but it can use some that are along the way. I don't know if that answers your question, but at least that's what I understood.
You have answered, but the point is, unless and until we see the things, because right now in Indian context, it is very few. I've seen that very few people have used the robotic, but it is meant for maintaining the or make the built up the warehouse systems, not the building systems. And this is the
Correct.
major challenge with the builders in India's in high-rise building and all that in Mumbai.
Correct. I agree. I don't disagree. I'm not saying this. I can probably use this tomorrow, especially in all the countries. But it's getting there, and I thought the idea is that want it or not, like it or not, we are getting there slowly. And it's important for us to probably develop these fundamental core things for these robotic systems. So by the time they're ready, we at least have everything functioning. So it was not definitely motivated to begin with in the Indian context, because we started to probably motivate this for operational buildings, especially if you go to some places, you will see these museum guide robots, as you said, Amazon warehouse robots. So that was the initial motivation, but application wise, this is applicable to, as you said, even for construction context. But in terms of implementation, and probably do I see this implementing tomorrow? Probably not. In the near future, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Mantha, for a wonderful presentation. I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
So my question goes in the same line with what Samir had asked. So suppose if we consider only two robots and if we consider several tasks distributed over several floors. So we have a task at the 70th floor, we have a task at 60th, 50th, and maybe probably randomly distributed. So how would a couple of robots, maybe two or three robots, will be able to minimize the path as well as time and whatever the constraints might be if we consider this kind of a situation?
So if you consider that, probably robot might not be able to do justice to it. So the context and the motivation should be clear. So this, when if you need to motivate this kind of an application for real world applications, then the idea would be that you have a larger floor space, or you have more tasks in one floor rather than one in 10th and one in 70th. Because as you rightly pointed out, you cannot, for example, it's just not a hammer that works for every problem that you have. It's not like a one fit solution, like one size fits solution. So the idea is that you need to motivate this well enough. So for example, this was motivated for large floor spaces, like single floor plan floor spaces, large floor spaces, or if you have at least quite considerable number of tasks that need to be performed in each floor. So I only see advantage, let's just say, in such kind of applications rather than probably a very sparsely distributed tasks in a huge multi-story space. Probably I should have made that clear.
Okay, okay, Professor. And my second question is, you mentioned that in the presentation that number of robots need not be inversely proportional to the distance traveled. So suppose if I have like the same couple of robots in a floor space, and how will I actually decide what number of robots are specifically required for a given number of tasks? Like how to optimize the number of robots for a particular number of tasks which I have on a floor?
Correct. That's a good question. Again, as I said, I did not show you all the scenarios, but the idea was initially, when we developed this algorithm, we did it manually. Then slowly, the application in terms of understanding as to what would be the ideal number of robots is not that difficult. Imagine this: you're just running the algorithm with 2, 3, 4, 5. You're just running the same algorithm with multiple of these robots. So once you do that for quite a good number of robots, you'll get a good understanding as to what your ideal number is. Meaning, let's just say, for example, for 2 number of robots, you know the total distance is so and so. For 3, you know the total distance is so and so. For 4, 5, 6, 7. So as you keep going along, you will find that that ideal optimal number of robots, where if you extend the number of robots further, you're not able to optimize the distance anymore. So that's your picking point. So as of now, I'll be honest, we did that manually. We tried to show that kind of a graph manually, but it's not hard to automate it. But again, it's not too hard for a person to see that either, because at the end of the day, you're just looking at a simple graph of what's the total distance versus total number of robots.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Mantha.
Thanks.
Okay, are there any more questions?
One last question.
Right.
What sort of training environments were used, especially for calculating path optimization and all that? And there are a lot of various algorithms are available. So were there specific any training environments were also used for this?
Actually, I don't know if you're referring to probably the simulation of these systems in a floor space, etc.
Yes,
I
yes.
just use Python.
I have one question.
Yes.
Are you using any data-driven algorithm for it? And if you are using, what is that?
What do you mean data-driven algorithm?
Machine learning algorithm, neural network or like that.
Again, as I said, we take inspiration from two or at least one such clustering kind of an approach that you have seen. So we use or we take inspiration from k-means and genetic algorithm. As I said, I hope you'll be able to connect the dots. So essentially what the robots are doing in this particular case is they know what the floor space is, they know what they need to do. Now they are trying to train themselves to understand as to how they need to visit these places. So we do take a little bit of inspiration from k-means and genetic algorithm. Hope that answers what you're asking.
So how k-means is can be used here? Can you?
So we don't, as I said, we don't necessarily directly use it. The idea was in k-means when you do, there's a way in which k-means does clustering. For example, without considering the connections in between, k-means does clustering. So what we do basically is we see as to what k-means is producing, and then we also see as to how, for example, genetic algorithm is producing these clusters. And then we take, let's just say, the positives of both these fundamental approaches, and then we try to develop our approach. So that is the reason why I say it's like a hybrid kind of an approach of those two, because we take the initialization aspect from genetic algorithm, we take a part of how, for example, clustering is done in k-means, and then we take part of inspiration from genetic algorithm again to do the crossover operators, etc. So there's a little bit of here both in the idea we proposed.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, if there are no more questions, thanks to Manta for this interesting presentation. We got another perspective, where another application where we can apply machine learning and robotics. So, thank you again, Manta. So we will continue with our session. So what we want to do.
So audio is muted, sir.
You are on mute, I guess.
Sir, you are not audible.
Oh, sorry, I was still muted. Sorry. Okay, you are able to hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Sir.
Right. Okay, so this is the next exercise. This is not really an exercise. You just need to submit your questions for the discussion we are going to have in the afternoon. So there is an image here on the future of construction. So look at this picture, review it, and then post your question, which we are going to discuss in the afternoon. So right now, only about 25 have completed this. So if more people can post their question, we can have a meaningful discussion on how we can apply the robotics and machine learning and other kinds of automation to the construction industry. So this is one exercise. The other one is is a small quiz on image recognition, what we did just now. So this is the last exercise of this workshop. So this is based on what I covered just now. So we have images in the form of bitmaps of 16 by 16 pixel. This is grayscale bitmaps. The questions you have to answer are how many input variables are there in the problem. So it's a multiple choice question. And what is the type of output variable, continuous, discrete, or both. So you complete this and we will look at the answer, and if there are any more questions on what I covered in the last lecture. I went really fast, but if you have some question, we have some more time to discuss that. Okay, let me go through your answers. So, yeah, about 30%, 27% have answered that there are 256 variables, and most people have answered there are more than 256. So I want one of you who has answered more than 256 to unmute and tell me why you think there are more number of variables. 256 is easy to understand. You have 16 by 16, that is 252 pixel. So for each pixel, you have one value. It could be a value between 0 and 255. So that is easy to understand. But I want those who answered more than 256 to tell me why you think there are more number of variables. Anybody?
Can I answer, sir?
Yes, yes, yes. Go ahead. Yeah.
Sir, I have given the answer as 256 only because it is we will unroll it into one dimensional, that means in the vector. But if we consider a bias, then it
Yeah.
can go beyond 256.
Okay, so including the bias, so it
Yeah,
becomes 257 or even more. Yeah, right. Okay. Anybody else? So maybe that's also a valid the answer. Anybody else? Why you answered 256? Majority have given more than 256. So just want to know why you think it is more than 256.
Sir, can I answer?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Sir, image size is given.
Yeah.
It's 16 by 16. So at the time of machine learning, you are training with image by image. Means first you provide the first image and its corresponding output. So at that time, your input is 16 by 16 pixels, means 256 pixels. So only 256 pixels required for the training, means 256 are the variables. So each variable means corresponding pixel value in grayscale 0 to 255. So like this way, we have an array of 256 elements. So that is the input X, and Y is corresponding digit output. What is it? So that is for 256.
Yeah. So, so you are saying answer is 256, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Somebody who thinks it is more than 256, I want to know why. One is possibilities with the bias term, you can have the more than 256. Anybody else? Any other answer why it should be more than 256? Okay, so finally to conclude, I think answer should be either 256 or with a bias term, it can be the one more, but we don't take the bias term as an input variable. It's a parameter, but we don't take it as an input variable. We put it when we did the regression, we added that as the last column in the input matrix, data matrix. But that is just a trick we used for doing regression. Input variables are still 256, but the parameters might be more. That's correct. So I would say 256 is the correct answer. Now for the next question, what is the type of output variable? So most of you have written it as discrete. I think that is the correct answer, but those who have written both or continuous, and I want somebody to explain why you think your answer is correct. Just to find out, whether you have some other idea which I'm not able to see immediately. Sometimes, I find this, I have some idea of an answer, but students are smarter than me. So they find something which I'm not able to think. So I want to find out if you have thought about something which I'm not able to see. So somebody should explain why you think it is discrete or both. You don't need to worry about whether the answer is right or wrong. This is part of the learning. We sometimes make mistakes. I also make mistakes. But the important thing is to have a discussion and clarify. And sometimes you might have some new perspective which you don't have before. So you can talk. You can tell me why you think it is continuous or both.
Sir, value should be count in the form of counts, not in the form of decimal. If it is continuous, then might be that we lost some information from the images or from the given data. So that is the reason that why we have taken discrete. For example, we cannot buy 2.5 tables. We can buy either 2 tables or 3 tables. So that is the reason that what I feel, so that the image should be in the form of counts, not in the form of.
Tell me, what is the output variable?
Discrete.
It is discrete. It is the class label.
Yes,
It
yes,
is,
yes.
we want to find out whether
Correct. One class, 2 class, yeah.
Yeah, so it's an image recognition problem. So maybe whether the label will be it's a rectangle or not a rectangle. So it is a discrete as a class label. So by nature, it is a discrete output variable. But what I guess is some people think the output is a continuous variable. It is a continuous variable. You don't get precisely the value of 1 or 0 for each of the output nodes. So you can get a continuous. So maybe that is how some people have assumed it is a continuous output. But I think the answer should be discrete. It's a class label. It's an image recognition problem. So it is a class label. So it has to be only one of the possible types of images which are trying to recognize. Okay, so any more questions about any of the topics we have covered?
Sir, I want to ask one question.
Yeah.
Sir, there is a difference between classification and recognition. Na? Classification, we will definitely have a discrete output variable, but for
Yeah.
recognition, for example, YOLO algorithm use recognizes the images. So therefore
Recognize,
we
tell
use,
me again what you said last.
sir, YOLO algorithm is there,
Yeah.
which recognizes the images. It does not classify the image, but it recognizes the objects in the image.
Right. It recognizes, it has to recognize it as one of the predetermined classes, right? It cannot recognize what a class which he has not seen before.
Yeah,
So it has to be one of the classes which has been trained for.
yeah,
So it
but
is still discrete.
yes, sir. But YOLO algorithm use regression technique for recognition, na.
Yeah.
So regression
No,
means,
even if you use regression, finally what you do is you interpret the output as either a probability or some indication of some score which indicates what class it is. So the final the output from the network might be a continuous number, but the ultimate aim is to classify it into one of the classes for which it has been trained.
yes, sir. So
Right.
can we say that discrete as well as continuous output can be there for this?
No, output, the output from the network might be continuous, but the nature of the output variable, what we want to find, here the output variable is a class we want to determine. So that is so whatever the continuous output we get from the network has to be converted into the output variable which we are interested in, that is the class label we want
Yes,
to identify, right?
Yeah, okay, sir. Okay.
Sir,
Yeah.
my question, related to that. Suppose a task is image detection. For example, if there is a image and we need to detect some object, for example, car, then the task is we need to identify the bounding box of the car in the image. So bounding box will return four corners of the box that is
Tell me again, counting of
bounding box means
bounding box, right? Okay, yeah.
it may be applicable to car detection or face detection in the image. So it will detect four corners of the face or a car, whatever the object that you are interested in. So at
Right.
that time, it will not return the class, but it will return the
Yeah.
four values. Four
No,
values means
as I mentioned, that is a different problem. It's not really the recognition problem. So that is a different problem. So the recognition problem is we want to find out what is the image about, whether it is whether it's an equipment or something else. So that is the output we are interested in image recognition. If it is face recognition, we want to say if it is you show an image, is the image of a particular person or somebody else.
yes.
So it's always the discrete problem. So this bounding box, finding where the object is, that's a different kind of problem. You need special algorithms for that. Maybe you can looking at the maximum score, you see, which is the area which has the maximum match with what you are looking for. So that requires something else. It's not the typical classification, the recognition problem.
Okay.
Yeah, so somebody has written, we can also have some derived variables for the input, right? But the basic, so these are derived features which we can use, which we saw that, we can use features for learning, but the basic problem is a problem with only 256 input, and depending on whether you learn in the feature space or not, you can have more number of features or less number of features. So that is possible. Any other questions?
Sir, I had a question.
Yeah.
While convolving using the weight matrix, how can an image be reduced to a specific dimension? Like for example, 16 by 16 image reduced to 3 by 3 matrix.
That is after pooling, right?
Yes, sir.
No. So in pooling, you divide it into, let us say, 4 quadrants, 4 windows. And in each window, you select what is the maximum value from the score computed by this convolution matrix. Okay. So in our example, we had some 465. Okay. So in the first quadrant, the max pool will return only one value, that is 465. Similarly, from the second quadrant, probably it is 0. Third quadrant, you have some value. So from each window, you select the maximum value. So you are doing something like a downsampling. You have the 1000, let's say 1024 the pixels. At each pixel location, you have the output from the matrix convolution operation, and from that you select windows of certain size and select only one value from each window. So you reduce the number of variables, right? Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Right. Any other questions? Okay, so for the afternoon, what we are going to do, we will start a bit late. We won't start at 2 o'clock. We will start at 2:30. So I want you to go through the recordings. If you want, you can revise what we have done during these last 4 days. So you can take some extra time, some half an hour for preparing for the quiz. And then we meet at 2:30. First, we'll have the discussion session on the practical application of what we have discussed so far. So that is the first part. After that, it will be just a 10-minute quiz. I'll post the link in the in our workshop page, and then you can do this. And after that, I also want your feedback. So there will be another feedback form. I will discuss the feedback, and then we will conclude. For your participation, you need to have completed the quiz. I will also look at the marks, but maybe marks are not that important. More important is you should take the quiz. So I know what you have learned. So finally, it will take maybe a few days to compile all the information. So you need to have completed the exercises. You need to have completed the quiz. So we look at, I don't expect all of you to have completed all the exercises. So I'll give maybe if you have completed some 75% of the exercises, that is good enough for getting this participant certificate. So it'll take me some time to compile all this. So you won't get the certificate immediately. Today you will not get the certificate. Later on we will send it. And also for the best participant award also, I need to go through all your exercises, what you have posted in the chat boxes. I look at the videos, and then I try to find out who has contributed most to the workshop. So this will also take some time, and just give me some more, a couple of weeks. I'll do this, and then we will inform you through email who has won the best participant award, and even for the certificate also. Just wait for some time. We will eventually do it. Okay. Any last question before we break? Okay. So we will break, and we'll meet at 2:30.